It is overtime here at Barrel Amongst Brewing and Old Favorite Friday, and we are talking about Kasteel Rouge. Now, Ralph, we've featured a lot of Belgian beers on Old Favorite Friday. We're a Belgian-inspired brewery. I always have to mention that. So we love Belgian-style beers. I'm actually surprised that Kasteel, we have never done a beer from them. They did make a great triple, a great quad. They do a chocolate quad, which is popular. I've seen this many times in the local market. But just by the nature of it, so many great beers, you don't get a chance to kind of weigh in on these. Now, this beer was recommended, Kasteel Rouge, by multiple people over the last couple years, especially people that love Belgian beers, love us. I've drank this beer for a long time, and I'm happy to finally be getting to it. This is a cherry beer. And when I say cherry beer, I mean this is a cherry beer. We oftentimes look at beers and really give them a lot of props for their subtlety and the fact that they're really, really well balanced. I'm going to go out on a limb. This is not subtle. Okay?
No, it is not.
This is straight cherry juice. It is over the top. I'm going to get into some of the complex kind of underlying flavors in a few minutes. But this is a beer. I think. Are you having this for the first time?
First time in years.
Okay.
It's been, I love Kasteel and what they do, but it's been years since I really picked it up off the shelf.
So tell me your impressions. I feel like you were kind of wild here.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's definitely been a while. To me, having it now, it very much has like a cherry cola vibe, and I mean that in the best possible way, because it does hit you over the head with cherry, while it actually still surprisingly maintains a beer, which to me that's sprightly Belgian even carbonation level. While it is in a can, you can tell it's a little more sprightly than some beers. And it's got almost like, well, you do get those subtle hints, the cherry's kind of up front, but you get the subtle hints of like that traditional phenolic Belgian character. I could see someone calling it a caramel. I would almost even call it like a vanilla. That's what to me gives me that kind of soda vibe. So while saying it that way might not sound the best, it does actually add a complexity with all that cherry on top.
One of the first things I picked up was vanilla. Picking up vanilla, and there's some subtle Belgian spice notes, I think you mentioned, or at least you mentioned off camera, that really round this beer together. It is definitely 90-95% trying to hit you over the head with cherry, but there are some subtle complexities on the back end that I think make it a little more interesting than some of like the smoothie sours that you have out there. This definitely has some sweetness to it, right? It's balanced more towards sweetness than towards acidity. It has some malt flavor, which is really nice. I saw a lot of reviews on this online where people were saying that this tasted like inauthentic extract. I don't get that.
No.
This tastes like cherry to me, and
Yeah.
I eat a lot of cherries. My son loves cherries, so we eat them all the time at the house. So. This tastes like real cherries to me. It tastes like authentic fruit. There's depth and complexity to the cherry flavor. It's not just a top note. It's not just a strong aroma with no flavor, which you get a lot of times when you're using extracts. So I think this actually comes across really, really well. Now, I do know that, for instance, my wife, cherry, raspberry, strawberry flavored beers or seltzers, she tastes them as cough syrup, cough medicine. Some people are more sensitive to those kind of flavors. So I get someone trying this and going, this isn't for me. I'm here. I'm with you, okay? But if you are into an authentic fruit beer, I think this is a pretty damn good example.
Yeah, and I would agree, because there's even a tartness, and we did a cherry triple. So there's a tartness that if they are using some kind of extract, I would say they're supplementing something else, because there's elements you can't get just in extracts, where I would say with extracts, it's more like you'll get an aroma and you'll get a flavor, but it's more syrupy in the sense there's nothing balancing it off, where this actually, like you said, does have other things supporting it. Some of those I do believe are coming from the cherry that you couldn't just do with an extract. And what I think so interesting about something like this is I feel like this is as far as, and I mean this in the best possible way, as you can go in terms of like flavoring something. Well, it still, to me, like if you were to blindfold me, I would tell this is some kind of like a beer or alcoholic beverage. Like it doesn't go with some of our pastry stuff now so far that I'm like, I think this is a milkshake that maybe you added alcohol to. This is actually, it's doing a fantastic trick where it gives you all the cherry you could want, but it's still a beer. And while I think I know ways you would do that, I just can't believe they pulled it off, because it is very cherry forward, but you still know it's a beer.
Well, listen, we're always walking that line, and we're doing it internally when we're trying to make beers. We did Devil's Decadence with all these adjunct ingredients, and we've done fruit. We just did a cherry chocolate quadruple, which we have done for years, and we did not do it for a couple of years, and we just brought it back. And we're always trying to walk that line of being a beer first and having those secondary ingredients second, right? They're not the feature. I think this is right on that border. I think it's right up to the line. Maybe it's a hair over the line, but I still think it pulls it off because the flavor profile is authentic enough. And there is that sensation, as you were talking about the acidity too. The approach of this beer is sweet. Then you get this nice zingy acidity kind of hitting the sides of your tongue on the aftertaste, which gives you a complete experience. You have acidity with the sweetness there, those layers of flavor, that cherry, that vanilla, that caramel, those kind of phenols and spices that are coming off of the yeast. I think this is really well made. I mean, listen, this beer's been produced for the first time since 2008. Kasteel's been making beer for a very long time. I really like this, and I have not had this in a while. I definitely drank this years ago, kind of like you. Probably had it more recently than you did. And I knew when someone recommended this beer, a couple people recommended this beer, that we were going to get to it eventually. But this is the first time I'm trying it in a while, and I get it. I get why people really like this beer. I also get a little bit of the pushback. And I can always respect that because we are very cognizant and also very critical of beers that we think are one-dimensional. I just don't think this is it.
No, I definitely don't think it's one-dimensional, and it's just interesting because, yeah, you're gonna have people who get that cherry and, like you said, are just totally turned off. But there's so much more depth to this where if I were to hand you, because like a lot of like even, not that this is sour, but a lot of the beers where it is like a smoothie sour or something, it's almost like it's already sweet. But if you have one, it's almost like they added a bunch of sweetness and felt that wasn't enough. So then they're like, oh, we're going to add lactose. And then somewhere there's a hint of sour or just a sour on the can. Mm-hmm. With this, I very much get that they were like, we're going to put as much cherry in as possible. But again, they didn't like forget about the beer. And they realized at some point that, okay, we've reached all the sweetness we have. There's not like we don't need to cover something up. Nothing was off. Where sometimes in those beers, I don't know if that's always the case, but it feels like when you already have a sweet beer, you don't really need to now add lactose. Like it's already sweet. So like they did a good job of at least keeping it in check in terms of like they nailed the target they were going for and they didn't go beyond that.
And also, listen, I don't want to insult anyone for enjoying like super hazy. We love hazy IPAs here. But in general, when you're not going for a style where part of the flavor profile and things of that nature is the hops, right? Mm-hmm. That end up in suspension there. This is a gorgeous beer. I mean, you really can't see it as well on the camera, but this is this like deep brown with these ruby hints, this kind of pink fluffy head. This is a really, I mean, I just like looking at it too. You can see that there's real fruit being added into this beer, and it also is cleared up and gorgeous to look at and doesn't look like I'm drinking a milkshake, which oftentimes really kind of turns me off. So that's a preference of mine. I'm really happy with this beer. I really, if you haven't tried it, and you like fruit beers, you're a big fan. This is a very modern beer in a lot of ways. This is the kind of beer that everyone's into, is just these crazy fruited beers. You're doing yourself a disservice if you don't have this, because this predates so much of that crazy, overly fruited thing, and does it really well. And I think it really gives a real good basis of what these beers can be, or maybe even should be. So I would definitely recommend go down and pick this up if you can. I think you're going to find this in more of your specialty kind of locations, right? You're not going to find this at your local grocery store, most likely. But you have to do a little bit of work to find it, but I highly recommend it. This is a, kind of a dessert in a glass, one might think. Ralph, you got any recommendations for food to go with something like this?
This is a little tough. Well, actually, I guess it's not tougher, but I would say anything as funny as it sounds, anything's like, I would say even like, and people might think I'm crazy, but anything like burgers or something where you normally pair more like with a soft drink, I would actually say this is something good like that. So like burgers, even if you do some kind of like Tex-Mex and things where like a lot of time you're at a, maybe not the most high-end restaurant, but you're like gonna sit down with your friends or whatever, any of those kind of like, not sound funny, but Americana type meals, I would say this would go perfect with that.
And it might be really simple, but a dessert, but I wouldn't do a super sweet chocolate. I think a nice you know, even doing like a, you know, 95% cacao, like a, you know, a dark chocolate that's a little bit bitter, this is going to accentuate it really, really well because those flavors go together. It adds a little bit of sweetness, it adds a little bit of acidity to it. So I think you can't go wrong with that kind of pairing as well. Guys, we really hope you enjoy this one. We hope that you pick this beer up. Continue these comments and let us know what we should be drinking, because even though I know this beer well, I might not have brought it out for Old Favorite Friday if you guys hadn't suggested it. So please keep those coming. Please poke around to the channel, see the longer conversations we're having about great beers just like this one, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.